All right, we will call the Monday, August 23rd, 2021 special meeting to order. And a roll call, please, Mrs. Haas.
Mr. Nickram?
Here.
Mr. Paul?
Here.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Here.
Mrs. Bukta?
Here.
Mr. Cheney?
Here. Please join me to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just as we read the Pledge of Allegiance each month, we also read the vision and mission statement of the district, for that is why we are here and why we do what we do. The vision statement is we are achieving distinction in all that we do, and our new mission statement is to cultivate an inclusive, high-performing culture of growth and community. That being said, we'll go ahead and move to the COVID-19 data update for Jefferson County.
Sure, if I could just provide a few words as we begin this evening. Good evening to everyone here as well as viewing. I know we have quite a large audience joining us virtually as well. The purpose of our meeting tonight is to have a meaningful discussion among our board about how best to serve our community during this continuing global pandemic. We know kids learn best face-to-face, so we know we need to work together to keep all of our kids in our schools. As we have seen in other nearby communities, as well as on the news and in social media outlets, emotions are high on both sides of certain issues related to mitigation strategies. We ask that all involved at tonight's meeting, whether it be through public comment, during board discussion, or in the community following tonight's meeting, please be respectful of each other and remain calm and thoughtful so that we may have that meaningful discussion. Hearing several sides of any issue and thoughtfully considering those viewpoints is what makes decisions in our community stronger. If we are truly going to be in this together for our kids, we must all treat each other as we would like to be treated if we were in a similar position or situation. Every person's viewpoint, no matter what that may be, is valid to them personally, and therefore should be held to be valid and thoughtfully considered by others. And with that, I am happy to introduce Sumrose. Sumrose is the epidemiologist for Jefferson County Health Services. We asked our epidemiologist to join us this evening simply to provide a data update relevant to Jefferson County as we begin other topics within our meeting this evening. Good evening, Sumrose.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all and provide information and data as it relates to COVID-19 in Jefferson County. I'll go through my slides and I'll be happy to take questions and either provide answers now or get back to you all with the answers if I don't have them right now. So bear with me just a moment here while I pull up my slides. Alrighty, I'm hoping that you all can see this and hear me okay. Just feel free to let me know if you can. All right, so right now, I'll just touch upon our case rates right now. Our 7-day average is 18 cases per 100,000. Our 14-day average is 17 cases per 100,000. This does not include probable cases. So if you're wondering what that means, confirmed cases only include those cases which are confirmed through a PCR or a lab test. It does not include those results that are received through antigen tests. Generally, if you get an antigen test, you're supposed to get a PCR test afterwards. That doesn't always happen. So this is an undercount. It's a significant undercount. It does not, as I said, include those probable or antigen results, which there are many because simply put, testing access is not where we want it to be, evidenced by a few different things, including our test positivity rate, but really we're seeing a lot of folks use these antigen tests, which of course, like I mentioned, is not counted in this case rate. looking at sort of a trend over the past several months, you'll see that where we are right now with cases is similar to where we were in April of this year, much lower than we were during our peak last year or earlier this year in January, but still a pretty significant peak. Essentially displays the same data. This breaks it up day by day, as opposed to this previous graph that shows you more of a trend line, each data point in the previous graph. So this graph over here, each data point conveys the total 14-day average of cases. Looking at the data week by week, again, this is all for Jefferson County. I will get to local Fort Atkinson specific data in just a minute or so, but I wanted to touch upon this because it gives you a good picture of where we are. I'll also make a couple of additional points later on, but I think it's really important to ground us in where we are right now. So, you can see over here that in about late April through most of July, we had almost no cases. So especially that last week of May through about half of July, we had 0 to 1 cases per day. There were quite a few days where we had no cases. We had about 1 case every other day or every 2 days, which was a really amazing place to be after a year and some of a lot more than that. And so we're really happy to see that. Of course, that data-driven consultation was evidenced in our interactions with all of our school districts as we looked at what was happening in summer school, as we discussed mitigation plans and sort of school plans for the summer. It was reflected that we weren't seeing a lot of case activity. Of course, within several weeks that changed dramatically. We went from 0 cases to 6 cases per day 1 week, and then it went to 8, and then all of a sudden it shot up to 16 and 18, which is where we are right now with 18 confirmed cases per day per 100,000 individuals. For those trying to do the math, there are 85,000 individuals in Jefferson County, or just about there. I wanted to just make a couple of quick points because we get this question a lot about who is being affected by COVID as far as hospitalizations, cases. So right now, I would say over 90% of our cases, if not 100%, are the Delta variant. The state is sequencing samples as fast and as feasibly as they can, and it's showing that the Delta variant is by far the dominant strain of COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 in Wisconsin. That is absolutely the case within Jefferson County as well. You'll see here that the relative proportions of cases within each age group have not changed a whole lot since earlier this year when we had the wild type variant or the UK variant or the other variants that were not the Delta variant. You'll see significant differences between the months as we go along, but overall not an incredibly disproportionate rate of cases within the younger age group. Certainly as you have more cases overall, that results in more cases overall for each age group. So yes, there are more youth getting the virus, but overall the proportions are remaining relatively constant. The same goes for severe cases. So in hospitalizations, right now we have no evidence to suggest that the Delta variant is more severe as it relates to disease. It is absolutely, however, more contagious, up to 70% more infectious. That incredibly rapid rise of cases that we saw that resulted in Jefferson County Health Department putting out several weeks ago, actually almost a month now, a recommendation that even fully vaccinated persons should mask up and physically distance, that all individuals, regardless of vaccination status, should maintain caution in high-risk settings, so indoors, public settings, crowded areas, etc. So looking at cases on a more local level, looking at the data for Fort Atkinson, so you can find all this data on the Wisconsin Department of Health's website. We do not provide data to this degree, data that is this granular on our dashboard, simply because it requires a lot of work, and we simply don't have the capacity to do this every day. It is also, to an extent, imprecise. So you'll see here that looking at the city of Fort Atkinson and then the surrounding area, so for Fort Atkinson, it shows that the 7-day case rate is 95.9. Looking at the area just around it, it's 160. That is a massive difference that is likely not accurate. However, the true number is likely in between or around there, which is why we really elect to go with county level data. I don't want to negate the value of using something as locally driven as this. However, I just want to point out that there are significant limitations, which is also why we don't generally provide this information. So you'll see on our dashboard that we've provided the overall raw counts of cases per city. We have not adjusted that. We have not shown that over time, again, because it is pretty unreliable, especially when you consider low access and utilization of testing. You can also view the same information by school district, which is another point that I want to make, that, where you can look at the city of Fort Atkinson and say, okay, we're at we're not at the highest level, we're at a substantial transmission level, which is of course a place of caution as well. However, when you look at the same data by school district, you'll see that we're in a place of high transmission for Fort Atkinson. Again, just pointing to the need to sometimes at least consider the county level data, or vice versa. If you're going to go by, county data, you still consider local data as well. I'll give you an example. Last year, when we did have a significantly high rate of cases, we did have jurisdictions within the county that had 0 to no cases, 0 to 2 cases per day, and they chose to reflect that in their implementation of mitigation measures. Before I go into vaccination rates, I'll just pause here and see if there are any questions at this time related to cases.
This would be directed to board members.
The board members have any questions for Sumrose?
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry. So I'm just looking at the slide where it says cases by school district. Can you tell me a little bit more how that data is collected, how that's analyzed, things like that, so I have a better understanding of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes kind of, it's more straightforward than you would think. It goes by address and where they fall within a school district, so it does not take into account any age groups or anything else, simply an address where it falls within a school district, and then it aligns the case rates within that school district. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Could you clarify for me, you're saying that the Delta strain is more prevalent. Are those tests being, are you able to discriminate the difference between the Delta variant or not? Is that something that is, really just basically clarify if that's possible? Or are you just making that assumption?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
I just was curious if that was just kind of just like the assumptions, the inference based on the data, considering the contagious.
Yeah, so I think there are 2 parts to your question. One, when someone is tested, do we know what variant that is? Yes, in a sense. So generally, by the time we find out what variant a particular specimen might be, it is almost too late to do anything about it. From the time of specimen collection to the receipt of the lab results telling us what variant it is, it can take 2 to 3 weeks. So by then, people are done with their isolation guidance. They have likely spread it to others. So an individual rarely, if ever, finds out what variant they have. There's really no almost clinical benefit, but looking at how fast cases have increased, how fast cases have spread within a network, that is where we obtain those estimates of how much more infectious it is. Certainly last year we did not see spread anywhere near that fast. And the fact that it went from 0 to 8 within several weeks was definitely indicative of that Delta variant being that much more infectious. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Can you explain to me the legend that you have up here on the screen right now? How do you calculate between high, substantial, moderate, and low?
Yeah, so this is dependent entirely on case rates. So you'll see here that high transmission is 100 or more, so that's 100 or more confirmed cases per 100,000 reported in the past 7 days.
What's the time range within that? So is that
7
like
days.
forever? Is that between this date and this date?
So this would be the past 7 days, and this is updated every day.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
there
Any other
further-
questions related to cases before I go into vaccination rates?
I don't see
All
any.
right.
We can go ahead.
Great, I'll move forward. So,
No.
looking at the vaccination rates for Jefferson County as a whole, looking at those who have, you'll see a breakdown right here for percent of residents with at least one dose is 48.9%. of residents who have completed the vaccine series is 45.8. Looking at adults, so 18 and over with at least one dose, that's 58%. And looking at adults who have completed the vaccination series is 54.8%. You'll see here that the younger age groups are lagging significantly behind our eldest age groups with a pretty gradual rate of vaccination between those groups. We have vaccination data available in a number of ways. You can see it by school district, by municipality, by census tract, by zip code tabulation area. Again, I'll make the same point that I did earlier, that the data can tell a different story depending on how you're choosing to look at it, right? So looking at the vaccination data by school district, you'll see that 53.1% of Fort Atkinson School District residents have completed their series. You'll also see in the surrounding areas that, for example, Jefferson, Johnson Creek, and Watertown have a lower vaccination rate compared to Fort Atkinson's. However, when you look at the vaccination rates by municipality, you'll see that this changes up quite a little bit. So Fort Atkinson, for example, has a vaccination rate of 54.4, whereas Conshohocken has 51.6, and there are varying differences between the areas around us. I just threw this in here to make the point about how sort of convoluted it can be when you're looking at extremely granular local level data. Looking at these four census tracts that are here. So this one here, the second one, this one, and this last fourth one over here. It ranges anywhere from 50 to 59.2, all within the relatively same area. I'll just make some note of considerations at the health department that the safety of students, teachers, and staff is our first priority. That communities should, should implement the necessary measures to limit the spread of COVID-19 to ensure that schools can remain open and safe for students, and that students need to be back in school physically to get the best possible education they deserve, especially when you consider that many school districts may not be offering virtual learning throughout the year. Our plan for our community is based on science, data, and doctors, as well as a larger scientific community. We will continue to review our policies for risks and additional needs based on the emerging body of evidence that exists, based on state and federal guidance. Another note that schools need the flexibility to respond to the specific needs of their student, teachers, and staff in their local communities based on changing conditions. So if there are no cases, and that changes to all of a sudden we have 15 to 20 cases per day, and then within a week we have 100 active cases within the community, we need to be able to respond to that in an agile fashion. And then I also want to make that last note that some children are at higher risk than others, and that we are at the health department are committed to meeting the health and educational needs of every student from every background. Just some additional considerations here. Keeping in-person learning functional and safe is our priority. That Delta is significantly different from previous and wild-type variants of COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. Our success with in-person learning last year is due to our implementation of best practices. We kept in-person learning pretty safe last year. We had relatively few closures compared to other counties and states, and we know why. It's because we did a great job at implementing the best practices that we know work to stop the spread of the virus. I want to, recognize that the risk of COVID-19 is overall low and much lower than last year because of vaccination, but it still remains a significant risk to many folks. We had 2 people die this week in Jefferson County, 2 local residents of Jefferson County, and I can't divulge too much. I can say that, had they been vaccinated, the outcome may have been different. And I will also make the point that one of those individuals was significantly younger than a lot of us would expect. I'll also make the point that we still do not understand the long-term impact of this virus. When people go through their infection, they experience the cough, the trauma to the lungs and the respiratory system. There's reports that up to 30% of folks who are infected have long COVID. But even keeping long COVID aside, we don't know what impacts this virus may bring about to our bodies, and that avoiding infection is our best strategy, and we know what works to prevent that spread. I don't have any other slides, so I'll be happy to take any additional questions now from the school board.
These are questions from the board exclusively, correct? Are there further questions from the board?
Could you tell me exactly at what point do you feel that these mitigation strategies are, I guess, where are we at? At some point we need to find a place of safety, and where is that going to be, and when is that going to be? Or do we keep continuing with these practices and strategies in order to keep our communities safe? I guess at some point we need some concrete, and may not even be a concrete answer, but I'd like to know what your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, thanks for that question. So several weeks ago, we put out guidance to schools saying that we recommend that schools require masking in all indoor settings. Sorry, I see my face looking back at me and it's a little distracting. And that was based on that increased case rate that we saw. If we hadn't seen that case rate increase so quickly, we wouldn't have acted and really recommended to schools that they require masking and that they implement all the other mitigation measures that we know work to stop the spread. Our recommendations are interim, so they're intended to be temporary. They are not intended to last the duration of the school semester. They're intended to be based on our data, right? We intend to be data driven, and that's what we're doing. We're looking at our local case data to see how fast cases are increasing, how many people are protected. Again, we'll take into consideration that these two individuals died this week, individuals who, were infected since our case rates increased. It's not like they were infected months and months ago. They were infected relatively recently. We are also seeing reports, and this is in a sense anecdotal, it's not evidence-based or peer-reviewed, but we are hearing a lot of reports about school districts around the country having to close due to increased spread within the schools, increased transmission within the schools, and we want to make sure that we know what to expect. And we have not seen peer-reviewed or really well-validated evidence that would tell us what to expect in schools if things were to open up, without mitigation measures implemented. Again, referring back to last year, we had great success because we did such a good job implementing those public health measures. And so, to answer your question, I don't have a specific case rate at which we would recommend, that masks be made optional, for example. And it's unfortunate that masks have become sort of the focal point of all this. They're one tool in our toolbox of resources. Certainly they are the most effective at preventing spread in a congregate setting like a school or a classroom. And so,
Excuse me,
So I have a question. How many of these cases are 17 and under?
I don't have an exact number for you. Actually, I have a pretty good, I have the percentage for you. One moment.
Guys,
hold on.
people,
I'm looking at the percentage.
show some respect.
So between the ages of 0 and 17, 14.6.
Mr. Jagbani, could you pause, please?
Sure.
She asked the question. If we can't do the meeting, we're gonna have to have them removed. So if we can't conduct the meeting, then we have to adjourn the meeting. So we can either adjourn the meeting or we can have the source of the inability to conduct the meeting removed. These are just civil rules that we all are adhering to, both us and you guys. She's asked the question and she is getting the answer. I appreciate some civility. Thank you. I got it. Mrs. Reynolds, if you'd like to go ahead and re-ask your question, go ahead.
How many are under the age of 17 that are infected?
14.6% of all cases in August occurred in the age group of 0 to 17. I don't have a number for exactly how many are actively infected right now, but for August, it's about 15%.
And that's in Jefferson County?
That is correct.
Any other questions from the board?
You mentioned that I'm sorry about that. So you mentioned that the numbers that we're seeing now was somewhat similar to what we're seeing in April. Can you kind of talk a little bit Thank you. Can we talk a little bit about what the difference is between April versus today? Obviously, it might be a little bit obvious, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding this here.
It is the Delta variant. It is that much more infectious that we are so concerned about it. Again, I want to make the point that it's not known to be more deadly. It is not known to cause more severe disease, but it is absolutely more infectious, and it leaves us in a point where we need to be more proactive to stop the spread of cases. Whereas before, in a sense, not that we were more lax about it, but that based on how fast the Delta variant can spread, we need to be more proactive about this because it will take far less time for it to escalate into a much larger outbreak. Again, as I was referring to earlier, we're seeing a lot of reports around the country where schools have started. Again, anecdotal reports that students are bringing home the virus and spreading it to individuals within their homes and their communities, vaccinated or otherwise. So again, I want to just focus on the fact that the Delta variant is what is making this so much different from before.
Do we have any type of idea of when we might see this peak at all, or anything that might point to what the future might hold?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So in localities where the Delta variant related surge happened earlier, so larger urban centers, those areas, many of those are now seeing a stabilization or even a decrease in case rates. So that's about a month out. However, I will also make the point that they may be in different areas with varying degrees of vaccination status, with varying degrees of public compliance to public health recommendations. But essentially, if all things were to be held constant, we could expect that we'd have that decrease or stabilization within about a month.
Yeah, Sam Rose, I guess a follow-up, kind of the same thing that Corey just asked. Compared to what we saw like last winter, I think from what I understand, the Delta variant, bad thing is that it spreads a lot quicker, but good thing is that it might peak and recede a lot quicker as well. Is that kind of what you're saying as well?
It's hard to speak to that second point as to whether it'll recede. That would make logic sense, but I can't commit to that. I can't say that that's evidence-based or data-driven.
Thanks.
Any further questions from the board?
I do not.
Not at this time. Thank you.
Nope, I'm good.
I'll make the last point that, again, our guidance issued several weeks ago to schools is intended to be interim because of these increased case rates, and I hope that that is taken into account today. Again, thanks for all your time, and please feel free to reach out to me anytime with additional questions. We would also encourage the community to reach out to us with questions. We're available through email, via Facebook. Please interact with us and feel free to convey your thoughts however much you may disagree with us. Thank you.
So Sumrose, just to sum up it really quickly, if people in the audience, because clearly we know that there are people in the audience who have questions. This is not the forum for that tonight, obviously, but they are able to contact you through the website and through email.
Absolutely. Folks, honestly, feel free to email me.
Sorry, Sumrose. We will have order in here. This is a civilized discussion. We are providing you with an opportunity. We are providing you with an opportunity to respond directly to the epidemiologist, but this is not the forum, and I apologize that this is not the forum, but it is. This is a board meeting. We will explain more further as the meeting progresses.
Are you afraid of our questions?
Move along. Thank you. Thank you, and go on.
Thank you very much, Sumrose.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Move on to the next item.
Excuse me.
Move on to the next item.
All right, we will move on now to the 2021 school opening plan report, and Dr. Abbott will present that for us.
I think we can all agree that we know kids learn best face-to-face when they're actually in our schools, that we need to work together to keep all of our kids in our schools. going to adjourn this pretty quick.
Hey, guys, if we can't get through the meeting, it's procedurally appropriate for us to disband the meeting. We don't want to do that. We would like to hear everybody's comments. We have a specific procedure for that. Right now, we are at the portion where Dr. Abb is explaining the reopening plans that we are to discuss tonight.
So this first slide, and just to be abundantly clear, this is where we were, if you notice, the 2020-21 school year. So last year, as we concluded the school year, face coverings were required. Concurrent learning, we did have a virtual format available for families who so chose that learning format. We were actively involved in symptom tracking. We had internal contact tracing happening, as well as quarantine status based on close contact status, regardless of symptoms. We had increased cleaning and ventilation. We had visual signage and mitigation strategies in place throughout all of the school buildings. In some portions of the school year, we were cohorting students, or students were rotating into the physical facilities. We were actively physically distancing at either 3 to 6 feet, depending on what our facilities would allow. We had physical barriers in place in large group settings. And then we had limited shared materials and small group interactions in some of our classrooms. And then, of course, we had increased hand washing and hand sanitizing stations. And obviously, these are simply highlights of some of the mitigation strategies that were enacted last year. I'd like to take just a second. We were made aware of a few inferences that were out in the community over the last couple of weeks related to some potential actions. Perhaps some felt that the school district or the board were looking to engage in. And I really think it's important for us to be clear this evening that the items on this list were never part of the discussion and were never intended to be part of the school opening plan this year. The freedom to choose if your child receives a COVID-19 vaccination is certainly not something the school district has ever taken a position on, nor is that something that has been discussed, and I'm thinking I would have been part of that discussion. In-person learning for the duration of the school year, that is something that we brought to the community in a communication at the end of the last school year, that we were discontinuing a full virtual option for next year, but that we would have in-person learning throughout this school year. Equal opportunities for our children regardless of their vaccination status. Again, we've never made comment, nor did we have, or do we have any thoughts of having different experiences for kids based on whether or not they've received a COVID vaccine. An opportunity to enjoy important social interactions such as school dances, school trips, and extracurricular activities without restriction. That's definitely something that we are hoping to enjoy throughout the year as well. And then voluntary only COVID testing in schools. While there are other area districts or other districts around the state and country that have activated COVID-19 testing programs on their school sites, that is not something that the school district of Fort Atkinson has been in discussions about relative to the ample opportunity people have in our community to get COVID testing should they so choose. So where are we now as we start shifting gears into the next couple of weeks as we welcome students back into our schools? We are committed to returning to in-person learning, period. We're looking to restore regular classroom procedures, including small group work and shared materials. We're looking for in-person school events. We're looking at walking back plastic barriers or some of those other items that I mentioned just a few moments ago. We're not looking at cohorting or rotating groups of students. We're looking to return to typical lunch procedures as an example of different procedures that perhaps were altered within different school sites to accommodate some of the mitigation. We're looking for that return to normalcy. We are looking to limit visitors, and that doesn't mean close doors to everyone, but we do feel like having a sense of who's in the building and why they're there, should we need to look into active cases and those types of things that would be helpful to us. We would be looking to re-engage field trips, which is something that we've actively been part of this summer as part of a very successful summer school program, so we would definitely look at that continuing on. We would continue to have contact tracing, but taking place at Jefferson County Health Services. We believe that that is where contact tracing should exist as a point of origin. Certainly, we would be more than happy to assist them as they have specific questions related to active cases. We will do everything we can to support them in those efforts. And then student quarantine, which is a change from last year, would be related to reported household positives, and that would equal staying home, and the duration of time would be based on those circumstances. And again, that would relate to the bullet just above there, contact tracing as primarily facilitated through Jefferson County's Health Department. We're also looking at continuation of some of our best practices, and these are things that we would contend are related to communicable disease in general. This is not specific to COVID, but this list are things, or included in this list are things that are just good practice when people are ill. So for instance, I know from experience here that RSV is a significant sickness that has been impacting our community this summer. This list would be applicable there, or pertussis, or that list might go on. But on that list, clearly the first thing is just staying home with any sickness or with symptoms. Consider wearing a face covering to avoid communicable diseases. Symptom tracking, increased hand washing and hand sanitizing. These are just good practices. Enhanced cleaning, things that we will keep in place that we started last year that have worked so well for us, we wouldn't dream of going back. Improved ventilation, practices that we engaged last year, we would certainly continue that heading into the new school year, and perhaps even with additional work in that area. Spatial awareness and physical spacing. What is it that we can support in helping kids get the teaching and learning that they need in the manner with which they need it in the spaces that we have? Clearly, parent communication and education, and then student and community visual reminders. Some of the sign work and some of the dots and those things have been very helpful to people. So what we would offer for the board's consideration is as an optional enhancement. So if we look at the larger box, the items that I've just read, those are things that are just good practice related to preventing the spread of communicable diseases. An optional enhancement would be face covers being required, but with certain circumstances allowing for them to be removed. So one version of this could look like face coverings being required in certain circumstances where they could be allowed for removal would be when students are out of doors, when they're actively eating or drinking, or for adults when students are not present. Other considerations related to that potential enhancement would be groups of impact. So one thought would be all students and all staff, and another would be pre-K through 8th grade students and pre-K through 8th grade staff. You'll notice that we have a line through the second option, which I know in some circles there has been talk about using the 12-year-old age, given the vaccination availability. And the way that our current middle school is structured, putting that school into 2 parts for a face covering requirement would be impossible. And then another consideration, if the board is going to look at doing something like this, is short time frames. I think one of the things that we've heard from people, and we certainly would agree with, is that we don't need to be making decisions for November in August or September. When we start with students, we will have 12 student contact days between their first day and the Friday after your September board meeting, which means that topics related to mitigation will again be continuing at that board meeting. So whatever the board discusses later in the meeting, again, we have items that are going to happen regardless because they're just good practice. And then we have the item clearly, which is the most contentious, is if there was going to be consideration of face coverings. And we can come back to this at the point where you're having your discussion later in the meeting. There are two external requirements that the board does need to consider. At the June meeting, the board did take action to discontinue face coverings on in buses or district vehicles. In that time, it's been made abundantly clear at a national, state, and local level that districts do not have an option to negate that, as it is a CDC order at the federal level, and there are financial fines that can be imposed on the school district for not having that in place. So that is an action the board would need to consider this evening to become once again in compliance with that federal order. And then the WIAA, we have been following their guidance in good stead throughout the pandemic, and we would certainly encourage, albeit no board action is required, to continue accepting their guidance. Our hope as our fall seasons have begun in football and cross country and other sports are in action, to be able to continue that play in a healthy fashion throughout the course of the fall and later. The one thing I would just point out to the board and the public is there is an agreement between all of the schools in the Badger Conference that when we are in competition or visiting other school districts, that we yield to their level of mitigation should it be greater than ours at that time. And again, we would love to be able to have teams to compete against at our contests in order to ensure that that agreement has been made among all of the school districts involved in the Badger Conference. So again, I'll just circle back. We definitely know, and we've learned firsthand last year, that kids learn best face-to-face. And we're definitely hoping to work together to keep all of our kids in our schools moving forward. And that is the end of my report for this evening. Mr. Cheney.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abbott. We will now move to the public comment portion of the evening, and prior to that, I would like to read our policy and procedure. As we begin the public comment, I want to share with you policy and procedure that we implement to have public comment. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes in duration. Participants shall direct all comments to the board and not to staff or participants. Participants shall address only topics within legitimate jurisdiction of the board. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. The presiding officer may, 1, interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. 2, request any individual to leave the meeting when that person does not observe reasonable decorum. 3, request the assistance of law enforcement officers in the removal of a disorderly person when that person's conduct interferes with the orderly progress of the meeting. 4, call for a recess or an adjournment to another time when the lack of public decorum so interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting as to warrant such action. The portion of the meeting during which the comment of the public is invited shall be limited to 30 minutes unless extended by a vote of the board. To implement this portion of the meeting, Dr. Abbott will be calling the names of those who signed up to speak. He will read who will be speaking, who is on deck, and who is in the hole to speak. Please remain seated until you hear your name. When Dr. Abbott calls your name, if you wish to pass on speaking at that point, please state loudly that you will pass. There will be a 3-minute timer on the screen for the speaker, audience, and board to see. I will mark the end of the 3 minutes by the banging of the gavel. After 30 minutes, the board will consider whether to extend public comment and for how long.
Our first speaker this evening is Donald Williams, followed by Zechariah Lang, and then James Fitzpatrick.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. As a physician, we spend most of our time doing a number of things, one of which is putting out fires. That's treating an ear infection, broken arm, etc. Those are the most fun as a physician because there's instant gratification. But the thing I really spent most of my career doing is stacking the deck in favor of people living healthier lives for a variety of ways. I know, for example, that every time I treat a patient with high blood pressure, I have to treat 14 patients to prevent one of them from having a heart attack. I don't know which of the 14 didn't have a heart attack, and they don't either. But there's one person in that group that will be very happy they were treated. That's what we're talking about tonight. The idea is, how can I stack the deck in favor of our children being healthy and remaining healthy? We know from the experience of the last year and from research studies that masks work. They tend to work in two ways. They work best if I have COVID. I am less likely to spread COVID virus particles to all of you. That's the way they work best. And in fact, the Delta virus, people shed 1,000 times more virus particles than the original strain of COVID. Masks also work if you have COVID and are shedding virus into the air to protect me from catching it. So there is a both give and take with masks. I have practiced my whole career by the principles of the golden rule, meaning that I want to do for others what I'd like them to do for me. And I think the idea of masks is a good example of that. I would like to not infect any of you, and I would not like any of you to infect me. Based on my age and my high blood pressure, I'm one of those persons who is at higher risk. I'd love to get into vaccinations, which I'm a strong believer of also, but the issue tonight is masks. It would be an unbelievable tragedy to lose a child. It's a tragedy to lose anyone from COVID or have people whom I've seen, many who've had long COVID symptoms and are struggling with the brain fog or the muscle aching, the shortness of breath, et cetera. I think the mask mandate makes sense to protect our children. It would be an unbelievable tragedy that any child would die in our community from the effects of COVID. So I urge the board to consider the mask mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. Zachariah Lang.
My name is Zachariah Lange. I've been a resident of Fort Atkinson for 30 years. I grew up here in Fort Atkinson. Upon learning that we were going to be parents, me and my wife decided to move back to this town to raise our son. I'm not here tonight to debate science or reality. We all have access to the same information, and I'm certain everyone here has devoted ample time to it, and they are making the best choice for themselves and their family because they are the only ones who can make that choice. I'm here today because I value my rights to privacy and my right to liberty. Liberty being the state of the people to act and speak freely. Our first president, George Washington, said our liberty can never be safe but in the hands of the people themselves. The right to privacy is more obscure, but the Supreme Court justices have continued to support the implied right of privacy found in the Constitution, also known as the right to be left alone. The most noteworthy case being Roe v. Wade. I see these proposed requirements as a direct route to removing access to public services from certain members of the community, some intentionally and others not. These impositions threaten our liberty. They seek to remove our right to self-determination. To be clear, I acknowledge that there are consequences to the choice that is to be made tonight. The world is a dangerous place, and every choice we make has consequences, both good and bad. Masking, not masking, learning in person, remote learning, even requiring versus requesting will have good and bad impacts on this community. Ultimately, it is up to we the people as parents to make those choices. It is not required that we satisfy anyone with an explanation. Your duty is to ensure that the services we pay for are accessible to all of us. To use these requirements would act as a bludgeon to force those whom you serve to meet unreasonable expectations, essentially making us qualify for access like voting literacy tests. It is an easy choice to support choice. It excludes nobody from options available to us as members of the community, and that's how I would implore you to vote. I will not wear a mask. I will not allow my son to be forced into wearing a mask through intimidation, isolation, or peer pressure. We owe nobody an explanation why it is the right choice for us.
Thank you. Next we have James Fitzpatrick. Next we have James Fitzpatrick. Keep aiming the gavel. Next we have James Fitzpatrick, Amy Larson, then Rebecca Van Ness.
Thank you very much, members of the board. I had the distinct privilege of serving as superintendent of this wonderful district from 1999 to 2013. This is a great school district. We've got great teachers, we've got great school leaders, administrators, we've got the best kids, and we've got wonderful families who've always supported the school district in making it one of the beacon districts in this state. I think we can agree on 3 premises. Number 1, we want to open face-to-face and on time. 2, secondly, we want our schools not only to open, but stay open. And third, all of us want a successful outcome in finally defeating COVID. Those 3 premises I think we all can agree upon. If there are no masking and other reasonable mitigation strategies, then what is the process for reacting to positive cases? We could have some pretty large outbreaks, as the Delta variant is twice as contagious as the previous variants. This could keep a fair amount of students and staff out of our school in isolation or quarantine, not to mention a hospital or, God forbid, worse. Nobody wants that. What good is opening the schools if we have to close them due to students and staff being out? Masking certainly isn't a perfect strategy, but layered with other strategies, it becomes a multi-layered strategy that can't avoid the spread. The best protection, of course, is vaccination with the Pfizer vaccine, now fully approved by the FDA. In addition to the protection the vaccine provides, it also allows individuals to have less quarantine restrictions if they follow CDC guidelines. I can't stress enough to staff and students, if you're eligible for the vaccine, get the vaccine and start now, because a full protection doesn't come until 2 weeks after the second dose. Additionally, I don't like making this argument, but on the liability side, when all the experts recommend one thing and you do another, you have to wonder what the liability there might be for a bad outcome. Again, I don't like making that argument, but as a past decision maker in this district, along with the Board of Education, liability always factored into my thoughts, especially as it related to the health, safety, and welfare of our students, staff, and families. Lastly, this has been a long and agonizing ordeal. People are indeed tired and worn down, but like a distance runner, we have to finish strong.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Next we have Amy Larson, then Rebecca Van Ness, and then we will have Maisie Alley.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what we'll take this opportunity, if you guys could please save your adulations or your anger for the end of the meeting so that we can get through these speakers, please. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening. My name is Amy Larson, and I have 2 children in the Fort Atkinson School District. I have been asked to speak this evening on behalf of the group Fort Atkinson Parents for Choice. The following petition has been signed by 370 concerned parents and Fort Atkinson taxpayers and reads as follows. Dear School Board, please find the attached signed petition from the group Fort Atkinson Parents for Choice. We, along with hundreds of other parent organizations around the country, are asking that our voices be heard regarding the decisions you are making for our children. We request the following. Freedom to choose if our child wears a mask during any part of the day. Freedom to choose if our child receives a COVID-19 vaccination. In-person learning for the duration of the year. Equal opportunities for children regardless of vaccination status. Opportunity to enjoy important social interactions such as dances, school trips, extracurricular activities without restriction. Voluntary only COVID testing at school. We, the Fort Atkinson parents of choice, will not co-parent with the school district of Fort Atkinson. We accept that it is our responsibility as parents to understand the risk benefits of the medical decisions we make for our own children. We strongly oppose any mandates and health decisions made on behalf of our children. We believe in freedom of choice for all parents. As our elected officials, we ask that you carry out the wishes of your constituents. I hope you will take a few moments to look over the packet of information that I gave you, which includes the signatures as well as supporting data for the Fort Atkinson and Jefferson County area. Lastly, I'd like to use my last minute to give a personal statement. I would like to state that I am not an anti-masker or anti-vaxxer. I stand for choice. In the packet I just gave you, you'll see photos of students, staff, and administrators gathering in the school building all summer without masks, just as many of you in this room. I have seen picture after picture of families, including everybody here tonight, taking vacations, participating in sporting events and large celebrations, maskless. And that was your choice. Here's where the problem lies for me. For you to make that decision to send my child back to school, and you decide that they mask, socially distance, put them behind plexiglass barriers, to me is hypocritical. And with all due respect, an abuse of your power. What kind of message is that giving our kids? Rules for thee and not for me. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much.
Next we have,
Could we please?
next we have Rebecca Van Ness, then Maisie Alley, followed by Ellen Nurkus.
Heavenly Father, I thank you for the boldness to speak your truths. Holy Spirit, I open the door and invite you to come in and fill this place with your holy presence, because your word says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. I declare the blessing of the Lord unto conviction, repentance, restoration, and freedom. Amen. The truth is that we're not fighting against a virus. We're battling against the kingdom of darkness, the father of lies, Baal, and child sacrifice. This war is taking place in the hearts and minds of people. It's an information war, and the information you choose to believe will determine what side you're on. Believing a lie doesn't make the lie any more true, and refusing to believe the truth doesn't make the truth any less true. Voting for mandatory masks and vaccinations is a choice to stand in agreement with lies and tyranny. God's word tells us that truth sets the captives free. And in a moment, well, we're hearing truths. And I feel obligated to give you guys a warning from God's word. In Luke chapter 17, verse 2, it says, "It would be better to be thrown into the sea with a millstone hung around your neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble and fall into sin," which is exactly what has happened. God has been removed from our schools, and our children have been led astray. Prior to this moment, you may have been able to claim ignorance, but now you know. I have clearly pointed out the violation of God's law, and you have no excuse. Know that there is no condemnation in truth, only freedom. Repent and be set free. Choose this evening whom you will serve, the living God Yahweh or Baal. God bless. And just so you all know, I'm running for school board.
Thank you very much.
Maisie Alley, followed by Ellen Nurkus, and then Julia Dewey.
Thank you very much for this forum tonight. I just want to let everyone know that I have a great affection for this district and town. as both my parents taught here. My father taught history, and my mother taught Latin back in the day. As a daughter of educators, my parents had my siblings and I critically thinking regularly around the dinner table. And I'm here tonight to ask some questions. My husband and I have 3 kids in the district. I am here this evening as their mother to advocate for them. My daughter, who is here tonight with me, complains of breathlessness and anxiety when masked. My youngest son got reoccurring rashes from wearing masks, even with my most diligent efforts at cleaning them daily. As a parent, I am much more worried about the organisms growing on these cloth masks that are worn for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, than a virus with a 99.98% survival rate in children. On to my questions. What are my children's alternative options if they cannot mask? What is the process for applying for voucher money if we need a plan B? If this is really about the safety of our children, why were these masks not mandated for influenza, which kills twice as many children? Why is there not more focus on the second pandemic, the mental health crisis that our kids are now suffering? And the anxiety put on our children is outrageous. I teach my children autonomy. They govern their own body. No one else does. As a mother, which is my most cherished title, I can no longer go along in good conscience with these mandates. And I thank you very much for your attention and listening to me.
Thank you very much.
Next we have Ellen Nurkus, then we have Julia Dewey, and then Shayna Meyer.
Good evening. My name is Ellen Nurkus. I have been a Fort Atkinson resident. I graduated high school from Fort Atkinson, and I have had 3 children in the school. Now I've had 1 child at least in school in Fort Atkinson for the last 20 years. Been here a long time. I've seen a lot. I have not participated in a lot of board meetings. Didn't always agree with what was done or what wasn't, but I always thought you guys were doing the best that you thought, and nothing was that adverse to what I believed. We've come to a different point now, and it started last year. Dr. Abbott was kind enough to tell us where we were last year at the end of the school year, and I think that was a great summary. I actually had a speech, which is in my pocket, going from the hip now, because a couple of things have come up along these talks. I'd like to remind you where we were a year ago, not at the end of last school year, where we were 1 year ago. We were having these same kind of discussions. This is why I started getting involved, watching the school board meetings, emailing board members and such about live schooling. I'd like to kind of remind you that we had the same expert on the screen, I'm pretty sure it was a year ago today, talking about how we had to shut our schools because of a positivity rate. That might have been the month before, okay? We agreed, you guys decided to do that. Then you heard some parent feedback and came back and said, wait, maybe that's not the best metric. I went back and looked. We would not have been opened at all last year had we followed that guidance from the health department. We then moved to cases. And again, I don't know if you guys remember that nice little table, red on the bottom, or green on the bottom, orange, yellow, up to red. If you guys remember, anything over 10 cases or more, our high school would not have been in school had we decided to follow that metrics that the health department wanted us to. We got to where we got. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy, but I was a little bit offended because he said we got through last year by doing this. He wasn't in that we. That was you guys and us pushing back to get our schools open. And I appreciate you listening to us. I think it's time to listen to us on the mask too. We heard a year ago how everybody was going to die. We said this, we've seen evidence, this doesn't affect kids the same. And it was kind of blown off by our health department. We know these things. We know our kids are relatively safe. And with all due respect, it's not your job to protect the community. I appreciate the fact that you want to, but your job is to prioritize our children. So give us parents, it's a hard decision, and I get it.
Thank you very much.
Give us parents a choice.
Next, we have Julia Dewey, followed by Shayna Meyer, and then Cheryl Costa, I believe.
Julia asked me to speak first. I'm Shauna Meyer. I've been a family medicine doctor in Fort Atkinson for 19 years. My husband and I have a student in high school that's been through the public school system since preschool, and I am proud of our city and our schools. I'd like to thank Dr. Abbott and the board for their ongoing dedication to the safety and fine education of our students, which has been particularly challenging during the COVID pandemic. I think we do all agree that in-person learning is best for a majority of students and a majority of families. And we can all agree that a safe environment improves learning. And we can all agree that masks are a nuisance and we're tired and want to stop wearing them. But unfortunately, the data shows that the pandemic's not over. And schools that have opened in areas to our south without mask mandates are now quarantining thousands of students and staff, and many of them are reverting to remote learning, which is not where we want to go. Cases and hospitalizations are rising again in our state. Nationally, we have the highest pediatric hospitalization rate due to COVID-19 since the pandemic began. No one wants to see our kids in the hospital. Vaccinations, our best hope of curbing the pandemic, haven't reached our community in high enough levels to protect us from the COVID harms. Community support for masking and other mitigation efforts is low. We're all tired of COVID. But as a doctor, I can't stop advocating for the health and safety of our students and our community, and as the school district leadership, neither can you. The school district of Fort Atkinson made tough choices in spring and fall with regards to safety measures, and you all made it on the best data that we had at that time. And now we know more. We have the information and the ability to help our students, educators, and staff stay safe. Our experts in health, including the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Department of Health, have published clear guidelines on how to open to in-person safely. Universal masking, social distancing, testing with appropriate quarantine are the pillars of those policies, and I am urging the board to adopt a universal mask mandate except with medical exception, testing and quarantine program, and to keep our kids safe.
Thank you very much.
Julia Dewey, and then Sarah Jones.
Hi, I'm Julia Dewey. I'm a pediatrician in Fort Atkinson. Most of the things that I would have liked to say have already been said, so I'm not going to repeat them. I think it's, there are probably very few people in this room who have spent time in a pediatric intensive care unit, who have put a breathing tube down a child's trachea to help them breathe. It's not pretty. And everybody keeps bringing up the mortality rate, which is disgusting to use as a benchmark in the first place, but the morbidity and the results that come of somebody having COVID, whether it's a child or an adult, are not what we've been talking about, at least not in the context of children. They could spend weeks in a pediatric intensive care unit, ventilated for weeks, which does long-term damage to their lungs. They get hooked on opioid medications because they have to be sedated the whole time, so that then when they're extubated, when the tube is taken out of their trachea, so that they can breathe on their own again, they have to be weaned off the opioid medications over time. They have an opioid addiction because of that. And then they have missed school. Their parents have PTSD from spending a month in the ICU. The child has PTSD from spending a month in the ICU with a bunch of tubes and lines stuck in them. They miss school. Their parents miss work. The parents, there's billions of dollars that are spent, or lost rather, in our economy because of parents having to take leave for their sick children. That was even outside of COVID. So these are all things that I think people need to take into account rather than just, oh, but how many kids died from that? We need to be considerate, we need to be thoughtful, we need to be less selfish about our ideology and our own feelings and emotions when there is science and evidence coming out of the states that have already opened up without masks. There's evidence just pouring out of those states right now that children are getting sicker and sicker. And maybe they're not dying, great, but they are getting sick and they are being hospitalized. And I would hope that all of our goals are the same here, and that we want to keep children healthy, we want to keep them safe, we want them to be happy, we want them to survive, to thrive in adulthood. And that's the reason why we put them in car seats when they're babies. That's the reason why we try to make them eat their vegetables. That's the reason why we do all these things to try to help kids be healthy. And this is no less an issue of that. It's the same thing. It's simple. It works. Please vote on the science. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Cheney, if I may, our next speaker is Sarah Jones. We do have 5 speakers that would take us beyond the 30 minutes. Perhaps the board would consider extending for an additional 15 so that all of those who signed up would be able to have their time at the podium.
I'll entertain that motion.
I'll second.
I move to extend the community, I guess, speaking for an extra 15 minutes.
So we have a motion by Mrs. Bukta, a second by Mr. Paul. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed. And that passes. Thank you for
next,
the
yes.
heads up,
So next
Dr.
we have Sarah Jones, and then Tove, I believe, or similar, and then Cheryl Costa.
Hello. Trying to lighten the mood here a little bit, right? As you said, my name is Sarah Jones. My daughter attends Purdy Elementary School. I'm not here to argue right versus wrong. I'm not interested in persuading any of you to change your current views or your beliefs. Tonight, I'm here to discuss choice and my right to make decisions for my child. As Americans, we are blessed to live in a country that allows us the freedom to live our lives how we see fit. This freedom should also give us the power to choose whether or not we mask our children. Children are being muzzled, and if we continue to require or force masks on our children, we continue to promote a future where our children have no rights, no choices, and are made to believe that their opinions, their wants, their ideas, and their voices have no place in society. That is not setting our community or our society up for success. Instead, by ripping this choice from their fragile hands, we encourage them to go along with something that may not seem right out of fear. Fear of punishment, fear of consequence, fear of humiliation, fear of isolation. Is that the message we want to teach impressionable minds? To disregard their ideas, to remain silent when something doesn't feel right. I've seen members of this community, some of you here right now, out and about, enjoying your summer, mask-free, not practicing social distancing, living your life free to make choices. And now, in 1 week, some of you want to change that. If you want to do that for your child, I support you. But let me choose to do what's right for my child. It can be both. freedom for you and freedom for me with a choice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Matthew. And then we'll have Cheryl Costa and then Joshua Knapp.
I'm sorry, but could you please state your name? I wasn't able to hear it over the clap.
My name is Matthew Took.
Thank you.
And
apologies.
all right, yeah, that was kind of sloppy.
I wasn't going to say, but.
Praise be Jesus Christ. I would consider myself a fool for Jesus Christ. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And as a result, I've often been called not following the science when I believe in things like the power of prayer. I believe that Jesus Christ can lift people out of addictions. He can change people's lives. I've seen it in my life and I've seen it in others. Now I stand here today as a fool for Christ, believing things that science can't measure. And we've talked a lot about science today, and I want to talk a little bit of numbers with y'all. In the 18-19 flu season, 480 children died of the flu. The flu is more deadly to children than COVID-19. Praise God. Let's talk about, I did a little bit of research as well, and I looked at some things that have about the same probability of dying of COVID-19 for a child. And here's a couple. According to the National Weather Service, 49 people are killed for lightning strikes in the United States on an average year. 33 people are involved in unprovoked shark attacks. And these are similar to what we're seeing with children in COVID-19. The death rate is much higher with the flu. All right? What if I, as a parent, kept my kid inside on every cloudy day, or I put him in a shark cage when he went out swimming? You'd call that child abuse. All right? But I would actually be doing something somewhat effective. The masking are for large water droplet particles, not for aerosol. So they're good for, that's why you have to wear one when you had the flu. It's for coughing and the particulates that come out when you sneeze. But when you're in a room for 15 minutes in an environment, a mask does not help. We want to talk about mortality as well. I think it's a good one. But we've seen a 5-fold rate in suicide in our young people in our country for those lockdowns. And as a matter of fact, I believe we did lose a child in this district. Okay? So it is a shame. We did lose a child in our district. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next we have Cheryl Costa.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Costa, and I thank you for listening tonight to all parents and community members. As you prepare for the new school year, I would like you to consider keeping masks optional for students. A successful session of summer school gave both families and staff the freedom to choose to mask or not. It was handled both responsibly and respectfully by everyone who attended, both students, staff, and family members. We had students in attendance from all schools in our community, and staff worked from all around the area. Last school year, our students were required to wear a mask for over 7 hours for the school day. They had about a 22-minute break to eat their lunch. Some of the students even wore them longer if they rode a bus home, went to after-school care, or before-school care, because masks are required for those too. Students even wore their masks at recess, with me telling them, let's go out, get some exercise and fresh air. Watching them wear their masks was heartbreaking. Why are we masking our healthy children? That decision belongs directly to the parents. It is their responsibility and their choice of how they'd like to keep their child safe. With parents and families choosing what's best for their child, not the school board. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Joshua Knapp, then Carrie Kendrick, and then Jeff Patton.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Joshua Knapp. I have a daughter here at Luther coming back. Like everybody else, want people to come back, want them to stay back. I think we've seen in the news recently that there's been a few examples of schools going back only to be shut down because of an outbreak. None of us want that. I took the time today to go through the peer-reviewed research in the CDC report, and I read it, and it's boring. But the consensus in that is clear. There are 3 ways to prevent outbreaks that shut schools down: ventilation, social distancing, and masks. And as you go through these peer-reviewed scientific journals, there are many examples where they cite that children are vectors to each other, to their parents, to their grandparents, to the larger level community. And that masks drastically reduce that risk. There are no examples of masked schools having higher risk or having worse outcomes than masked schools. The consensus is clear. And there's a certain amount of irony that these are the kinds of journals that form the basis for what goes into a textbook. These are the kinds of journals that form the foundation of university education, medical, and otherwise. And here we are in a place of learning, saying that this doesn't matter. That is a whole lot. That's the evidence. If you don't like the evidence, you're probably not working in the realm of data.
Sir, in the salmon, sorry, stop the clock, please. Sir, in the salmon shirt, you have managed to interrupt almost every person with your own personal. If you cannot handle being in here with the rest of us being civil, then we will have to remove you. We don't have to mask you, but we could have you removed, which would be embarrassing.
Right.
Please start the clock. Sorry, I apologize.
Last point I'm going to make in the last 30 seconds is right now, the ICU in Madison at the Wisconsin University Hospital is at 95% full. At St. Mary's, it's 100% full. They are turning people away. That is right down the road. It actually is true as of today.
I'm asking for order, please.
As reported on a government website.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Carrie Kendrick, Jeff Patton, followed lastly by Dale Prisk.
Hi, Carrie Kendrick. There's tens of thousands of scientists, doctors, epidemiologists that have opposing information, all that has been blocked. I'm sure many of us have tried to post this information and been put in Facebook jail and what have you, okay? There is no, you are not allowing for opposing views. So you can skew this however you want. Logic dictates that wearing a mask for any amount of time causes oxygen deprivation, which would cause your immune system to be diminished for children. The pediatricians are telling you they're getting very sick. They have to be intubated and whatnot. They're also Stress is also a factor that attacks your immune system. Can you imagine being in a classroom, being muzzled like that? How stressful for the kids. Also, bacterial pneumonia from being in a mask for 8 hours plus, day after day. That's not being reported. This is very skewed information that you're giving us. I'm sorry, we are not ignorant. We are seeing that you're trying to control the narrative. The man that was on the screen, did he tell us how many of those people had comorbidities, had terrible diabetes, blood pressure, multiple diseases, and then, they're very unhealthy individuals. Sorry, I didn't have anything prepared, but this is all, yeah, thank you. Right, it is an information war. I have myself, very few times in my whole life, ever had health insurance. I have managed to get through everything using garlic, herbs, we have all these things that God gave us. I'm sorry. We have a choice. This is the United States of America. I am not against you wearing a mask. You have no right to mandate for us or small children. It is abuse. And I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jeff Patton.
Hello, I am Jeffrey Patton. I'm a member of this community and I'm a father of 5. In the past, you, the school board, have made the decision that our children should go back to school masked. I have listened to the arguments. I've noted that they are missing a few things, namely evidence, data, science, common sense, and basic human decency. You presented no facts at all, so let me do that now. COVID poses almost no risk to our kids. 4.2 million children have tested positive for COVID, and a total of 0.008% of them have died. What about the flu? More kids have died from the flu than COVID, by far. Now, did anyone on this board at any point in time ever suggest that kids wear masks for the flu? Did anybody in this room ever suggest that kids wear masks for the flu, which is more dangerous to kids than COVID? Now, do any of you know the psychological damage we do to children by forcing them to cover their faces, teaching them that the air is toxic and that everyone around them is sick? Have you ever wondered about the health effects of forcing kids to breathe through sweat and spit and dirt-soaked rags every single day? What about learning to read and they can't see the teacher enunciating the words? Or seeing the facial expressions of their classmates? What does it do to a developing child's immune system to wear a mask every single day, all day? Now, do you know what it's called when you force kids to wear masks for fear of a virus that poses almost no threat to them? It's called child abuse. This board has no right to rip personal responsibility away from the hands of the citizens and does not know better than the parents of our children. The greatest threat to school children today doesn't come from COVID. It comes from the woke government officials who think they are all-knowing and all-wise. Well, you are not all-knowing and you are not all-wise. We are here to tell you that we, the parents, will not stand for this again. And if you try to mandate this on our children, again, we, the parents, will be standing in your way. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Dale Chris.
Hi. Seems really strange facing away from a bigger group of people than a smaller one, but I'll try to go fast here. My name's Dale Prisk. I've lived in Fort Atkinson for many, many years. I have kids in the district, 3 of which who are awesomely in school last year, best they could be. Anyways, parent, district, parent, etc. My question is, I just want to know, who do you all in this room think knows our kids the best? The parents. Every single parent in this room can tell you something today about their kids that nobody sitting in front of me can, okay? And it breaks my heart to think that I have to sit quiet and listen to people bark orders and tell us what's best for everybody when we spent a year bending over backwards and agreeing with masking that we did not agree with, okay? So when we talk about things like compromise, I just want to know, where's the compromise for the parents last year, right? I didn't think it was a good idea to have my masks on my second and first-year-old kids. If somebody can explain to me why they need it on at recess, I'm all ears. I still haven't heard it, okay? So then you wonder why people get upset. There's a lot of people in this room upset. I'm trying to keep myself calm. But you know what makes people upset? Transparency. And when you march out the person in Jefferson County to BS everybody with inflated stats to scare us and use charts that are inflated to a 100,000 case number to make things look bad, it doesn't sit well. And then when people don't get a chance to actually ask questions and get answers, they're just told to be quiet and move on. That's what makes people mad, okay? And when we talk about spikes, let's be realistic. We're talking about 4 cases to 8 cases, 8 cases to 16 cases. We just heard there's 86,000 people in this county. Does that seem like a big number to anybody else? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, and there's people here way, way, way smarter than I am in this audience for sure. But I'll put my parenting up against anybody in this room, okay? And one thing I'm not gonna do is sit by and let people tell me what's best for my kids so it can protect them to feel like they're doing the right thing, okay? And everybody in this room was out enjoying their summer at the pool, at concerts in the park. This Saturday, everybody was out having fun. So don't you dare tell me that now is the time for kids to suffer so adults that don't understand math and statistics can feel safe about themselves. I don't agree with it. And beyond that, I'd like to say everybody on the board does a great job. And it's not a personal attack. I honestly believe everybody sitting in front of me is doing things that they believe is right, and we need to be respectful to them. But I think the compromise should be as clear as day. If you think masks are best for your kids, send them in a mask. If you don't think it's best, send them without one. Everybody get along, and let's focus on what's important. It's not people's feelings, it's our kids' education.
Thank you very much. All right, Dr. Abbott, are there any more public comments that we need to entertain?
There are none.
All right, we go ahead and move forward to the non-instruction portion of the meeting with the 2021 school opening plan. There is a motion before us that face coverings should be required on all school-related transportation until the expiration of the CDC order. Now, that is a federal order that we should theoretically be in compliance with.
It's a federal. Does not make law. You gonna call them to order, or we're done? We're providing information that has been discussed in many other districts and has been provided in lots of different forms by lots of different legal teams and everything else, and unrelated to optional masking in regular school operations. The suggestion that you've been given by a number of different groups has been to adhere to the federal order, which is just that. It's certainly not a political statement on my or anyone else's part. But you're currently in non-compliance. For you to not take action, you remain in non-compliance, and that is an option for the board. There are financial repercussions possible, and my job is to provide information for you to make decisions, and that's what I'm doing right now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abbott. Before us, we have the motion to entertain. Is there any discussion among the board?
Dr. Abbott, how long has this been something that's been recommended, or
It's been throughout the pandemic. Your actions last year encompassed guidance such as this. We are not bringing unilateral guidance to you for your consideration this year. That is a significant departure. If you look back at what I presented an hour or so ago, the idea is for you to have discussion as needed based on local information for you to make the best decisions you can for us here in Fort Atkinson. So in doing so, there are certain things, this would be one of them, that was covered in your actions last year that is no longer covered now.
Okay, thank you.
I think to just give some clarity here, I have the order in front of me. It is a 42 Code of Federal Regulation where they do mandate the masks in buses. So that is not something that we can necessarily debate. So I feel that I can make that motion in order to follow the federal mandate with masks on bus.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bukta.
If you would consider the resolution that's before you, it is,
to say
and
it.
you can certainly make edits, but it does, it's district transportation,
Okay.
which is different than buses, if you would.
Regular buses?
Yes.
So be it resolved that the face coverings be required on all school-related transportation until the expiration of the CDC order.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mrs. Bukta, a second by Mr. Nickram. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that passes. All right, now we have the resolution before us requiring face coverings requirement when children are present in buildings. Is there any discussion among the board on the motion before us?
So is just to clarify here, currently when it says no Board of Education action required at this time, it's what we currently have, right? So when we just focus on masks, it seems that, unless I'm incorrect, most of us agree with the mitigation strategies before us. We're just focusing on masks. And if that's the case, accordingly, that means that we are at optional. Is that correct?
Currently, everything that was presented earlier, and Mr. Scullin, if you wouldn't mind bringing that slide back up if you could, those are practices that would currently be put into place that do not require board action. So should you choose to go a different route related to quarantine or something that is different than what was presented to you this evening, then you would take action on that as well. And then, as presented to you, the enhancement, I suppose for lack of a better word, is the issue of face coverings being required. Your current action or lack of action makes face coverings optional, as they would be in any case, in any circumstances, anywhere. So no board action is required for them to remain optional.
So we have two motions in front of us, correct? We have the...
And those are simply resolutions for you to consider, yes.
So we could consider all buildings when children are present, or when children are present in K-8 only. So those are two of the options that we have before us.
Or take none, and
Or-
keep
or-
everything the same.
There,
As we had.
we don't need to have a
Take
motion
action
for
on
that.
right?
Correct, correct.
And Dr. Abbott, one more time, can you just review this next slide or two? Just give me.
Sure. So we were asked to provide options for the board to consider, and for sake of clarity, we put together just a few bullets for you. And certainly these are nothing other than suggestions if you so choose to go this route. Suggestions might include that if face coverings were required, we would suggest them being for a very short period of time in order for it to be an episodal action based on local information. Your next board meeting is the third week of September, so just as a review, once kids come back next week, that gives about it's 12 school days between then and the Friday after your next board meeting. If you were going to be doing masks required, we would strongly suggest them being allowed for removal when students are out of doors or clearly when they're actively eating and drinking. Please recall earlier in my presentation there were a number of different items that we had in place last year that I made clear would be looking and feeling different this year. And then we would suggest that masking be up to the adult when students are not present. But again, all of these are just items that I was asked to put together for you. Related to grouping, all students and all staff, or if you were looking for younger children, which I was asked to explore as well, given the configuration of our middle school currently, that would be pre-K 8, and again, including staff with that as well.
All right, so I'll talk first. Normally I'm last, but today I'll be first. So, we're talking about something that has way more meaning than just putting something over our face. We're talking about children. We're talking about a lot of different things that go into the children and their learning. And first I want to say, I am so excited that you guys are all here. We've gone to so many board meetings where nobody showed up, so I'm like beaming over here because you guys have all came, and I'm excited, so. But back to, it is a very, very, very tough decision to be up here to think about all of this. It's not just a simple putting something over a child's face. It's not. There's way more to it than that. And I've been going over this for weeks now, and back and forth and thinking about this and thinking about that. We also have to take into consideration the entire student, the entire staff member, not just their face, not just, like parts of them. We have to take into consideration all of them. And there is a huge mental aspect to students that sometimes gets put on the back burner, and it needs to be brought to the front. Health and safety is always important to have, always. But there's also, more of the mental part of it too. So it's hard to be put in a situation to where we have to say to hundreds of people, do this or don't do this. It's very hard. It also, it's very stressful on us, but it's also stressful on parents. It's also stressful on students. It can cause different things inside a person, whatever age it may be. So it's tough, but I don't think that is for us to really say. I think it should be more of the parent. I think we need to put some more back onto parents to help their children to grow, help them in all different aspects. We do have a lot more students that are having way more anxiety than they should. We also have students that, are way more fearful of a lot of things. And COVID's gonna be around forever. It's a virus, it's going to be here forever. And yes, we can take precautions to help ourselves, wash our hands, all of those type of things. But that's what we can do. I'm not going to tell somebody else that they have to do some of those, basic type of things. If a 8-year-old doesn't wash their hands, I'm not going to say that we have to police them to wash their hands. That's up to their parents to help them understand that you need to wash your hands. But we also can't be fearful. We cannot be fearful of things. We haven't been fearful of a lot of the other viruses that have gone around. We haven't required social distancing for a lot of other things. We haven't done a lot of those things that, the CDC is all of a sudden saying that we have to do. If you choose to do that yourself, I think that's a personal choice. If you want to follow them, go for it. But I don't want to tell my kids that they have to do something when I don't think it's right. I think it's more up to the parents to decide. When it comes to that kind of health and safety for a student, I think it's up to the parents. The parents should explain to their kids. They could research it with their kids. They can do what they feel is right because it is their children. We're here to help them grow, not hinder them. We're here to help them become amazing people. I sat with my boys and I explained to them, what are the possibilities of getting vaccinated or wearing a mask or washing your hands. Simple things. But I talked to my boys about that, and then we decided, and I ultimately gave them the choice. And that's what they did. They decided on their own what to do, and I support them on that. They're trying to be productive members of society, and they're trying to make their own decisions. So things like that, I think we should keep it up to the parents, and I think we should support what the parents do decide. So if they do decide to send their kids, in a mask, I think we should 100% support them. And if they choose not to, I also think we should 100% support them.
We need, I'd like to call order, please. Thank you. Is there any further discussion from any board members on the proposed motions before us?
I can go. I'll keep mine brief. This is pretty tough. I don't think anybody up here enjoys or takes joy in these types of decisions or having to tell people what to do. I think there's a couple things that we need to keep in mind, and one is that, if we do anything that, no one's going to all agree on it, so we're kind of, up that creek either way. So, the couple things that come to my mind are that, there's still, you talk about the flu vaccine. I think a lot of people bring that into the equation, and I think that's a decent parallel, and you can talk about what's more harmful for kids or whatever, but at least every year right now, parents have the choice to give their kids a flu shot, and all parents don't have that choice yet for the COVID vaccine. It's supposed to be coming this fall. And I think the one thing that we can all agree on, after the last year is that we all in this room want the schools open and want the kids in the schools. So everybody's got a different idea on what that should be. And my personal opinion on it is that, I think that masks do help, to limit the spread of the COVID virus. You may disagree with me on that, but that's not really the point I'm trying to make. It's that, the current protocols that we use to keep our schools open are just based on caseloads, contact tracing, and the way that is currently formulated is that if we have outbreaks in our schools, we're going to shut them down. you know, and maybe that'll change in the future. You know, that's not written in stone, but the way it's currently, you know, written is that, and we had to shut a few schools down last year. My goal as a parent and as a school board member is to keep the schools open. I think a lot of the, you know, everybody's got their thing about the masks, and I don't want to discount anybody's opinion or their personal experiences with that, but I personally feel like as a net benefit in the direct keeping our schools open that we should do it, but only as long as we need to until we see the case rates dropping again, and then get rid of it just like we did this summer. I'd like, you know, if we have the support to vote on it, we'll do it. If we do, I would propose that we have to re-up that every single month. It's not something that would be in perpetuity. We would have to sit here every month and decide whether or not we wanted to re-up it for another month, just to prove to the community that we're not running away from it. You know, we're gonna have to re-examine this thing. I understand that might not be a popular decision in this room, but it's how I feel. And I'd like to try to keep the schools open. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Just to piggyback off of that, Mr. Paul, is that in my memory, we have, prior to COVID, we have had to shut down a building due to the flu because we didn't have enough people to staff the building. That's just neither here nor there, but that is it's an example of when it's happened pre-COVID. We did also have it happen during COVID where we did not have enough people to safely staff a building, and it's not just our students, it's the staff and the people who we charge for their safety.
Is it my turn?
No one has to take a turn. I mean, you don't.
No, it's fine. In full transparency, I have done much reading. I have read every letter. I have discussed with myself and others the data. I've read it, I looked over it, and I also teach these students. Not in the district, of course, but I teach students. Today I had my very first day of school. In the past 2 years, I have not seen smiles as prevalent as I did today. And it was optional. Now, as a teacher, watching my students want to learn is one of those things that are so spirited in my profession that makes me continue, because watching them just be happy to learn is exciting. I am not a medical doctor. I believe that I have enough intelligence to be able to read the data as best as possible, to understand it, to analyze it. But I also want to make sure that I have an informed decision. And with my decision, I feel that I cannot get around telling our kids to do something that their parents may or may not want them to do, because it does distract them from learning. There is a very big difference from the time I started last year, where we masked our children and had many of those mitigation strategies and layers, which we still have. Not to the same 100% extent as last year, but we still have them because their health and their safety is very important. But so is their mental health. And as of now, we don't have that data because that data cannot be met as quickly as COVID can at this time. And I can't seem to get past it. I have tried to go both sides because I feel that is appropriate and fair. But ultimately, I just can't seem to get past making our children mask up without parents' consent. It is my choice to do that as a parent, to have a discussion, to talk about it, and feel what's best. We all have possible illnesses and diagnoses that we get second opinions for, because we do not always just say, hey, that's what they said I have, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. You guys get second opinions. At least I would. And you're right, I really have no right to tell you what to do, but just remember that you have put us on here. I believe I was uncontested. And so I put myself on here. I'm the newbie on the board. It's like throwing myself through the wolves, I guess, but at the same time, it is my civil duty to be here. I may not always agree with everything, but my front line is always for, in this particular situation, our students and our teachers. So that would just be my own opinion. I'm not going rogue, okay?
Gavel.
So I sit here today, and I have, like everybody else on the board, have really, really struggled with what we should be doing and what should be going on. And part of what concerns me today is that, and what's really kind of in the last couple weeks is that I want to first and foremost let everybody know that regardless of what happens tonight, we're all one community, we're all one team. And at times I felt, it doesn't matter who it is, but I think we need to take a look at that a little bit and kind of come to terms with, we're one community here, and regardless of what happens, we need to go move forward as one community. With that being said, gosh, I'm telling you guys, this has pained me to the core. And when I tell you that, I mean it. It's been an unbelievable toll on me and the board of trying to figure out what this is happening, right? We all joined the board not to do these type of things. We all joined the board to advance the school district, which is doing amazing things, and now we're plunked here trying to figure out whether we should wear masks or not. We are, basically we're making a decision for the first 12 days of school, and at that point, we make decisions, on September 17th or whenever our next board meeting is here, which I believe is September 17th. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and say that we should really take a look at placing masks or no masks on the parents. I think that's the best thing for everybody at this point. Please don't. This isn't about me. This isn't about nothing else, right? This is about us moving forward as a community. I get it, but I don't deserve that, right? So what I'm saying here today is let's put this on the parents, put this on the guardians to really get this figured out. But Fort Atkinson, we all need to come together and really understand what's best for the community. And it's not sending, it's not maybe perhaps looking at, it's probably looking at some of the things that we're doing today. I'm not saying we're doing anything right or wrong, but as these numbers continue to rise, we're only 12 days away of school, and we're going to see what happens. When I say this, it's not something I sit here and say, geez, this is absolutely the right decision. Right, I'm sure there's some of you that think it is. And on the other side, I may come back here on September 17th and think completely the opposite. But right now, I sit here and feel like we need to put this on the parents and the guardians and really move forward with that. I don't feel good saying that. I don't feel like, regardless of what I determined today, I was going to feel good about. But it's about moving forward together as a community, and I think that's the best option.
All right, so we'll go ahead. Should we move along to no entertaining of the motion? Is that where we're at then? To change nothing?
No action is required if you'd like to remain as you are.
Does anybody have any further discussion about the motions that were before us? All right, let's move forward to the subject B, COVID-19 addendum to employee handbook.
Yes, as the board will recall, last year we implemented an addendum to the employee handbook to address a number of issues related to off-site work, virtual programming, and the list goes on and on. We are asking for that handbook addendum to be discontinued at this point, given the circumstances have changed.
Any discussion about the addendum to the employee handbook? If not, we have a motion in front of us.
Be it resolved that the COVID-19 addendum to the employee handbook as documented in board materials be removed from use by the school district of Fort Atkinson.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Paul and a second by Mrs. Reynolds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes. All right, we are at the adjournment portion of the meeting. We need, unless we have any discussion about the adjournment part of the meeting, we can go ahead and entertain the motion to adjourn.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Reynolds, a second by Mr. Paul. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed? Thank you very much for coming out. We are done at